Okay, good morning. Late morning, I guess. So, I'm going to do a high-level seminar on deer hunting success. So I know that in this crowd, and people are probably going to be filtering in or whatever, there's going to be guys and girls in here that are at every aspect and every level of deer hunting, from first-time hunters to somebody who has been hunting for a long time and just maybe is looking for a tip or two to be able to harvest that bigger buck that they've had on camera. So I hope in the few minutes that I do have to talk or whatever that I can address all of that. And I'm in no way putting myself out like a deer guru. I've been hunting deer for a long time. I have had the opportunity to harvest a lot of really good deer. And be totally honest and upfront with you, it's because I work hard at it. It's not because I do anything much different than most people, but I work at it. I think about it a lot. I spend a lot of time in the woods. So hopefully today, with things that I can hit, will kind of give you a tip, or there'll be something that you can take and glean from what I've learned in the last couple decades of deer hunting that will help you in your goal to shoot a big deer. Okay? So, first thing I want to talk about is preseason or postseason scouting. So if somebody asks me, first of all, what is the most important aspect of deer hunting when you're talking about shooting a big deer, shooting a big mature buck in New Brunswick, I would have to say that preseason and postseason scouting are the most important aspect of the hunt. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're looking just to shoot a deer or to fill your tag, you don't need to work hard at it. But if you want to kill a 4.5, 5.5, or 6.5-year-old deer in New Brunswick, the chances of you going out the first trip, sitting in your stand with no prior knowledge to that area is very slim. So when I say postseason and preseason scouting, there's a reason why I've included both. This is a process. This is something that doesn't happen overnight. What I tell you today may help you in the process over the next 2 or 3 years develop patterns that are going to give you that chance at a bigger deer that you know that's in your area, or that you've had on camera, or your buddy has it just down the road or whatever. But there's a reason why you haven't been able to harvest that deer. Okay, so preseason, I'll just briefly talk about preseason scouting first to start. So depending on, and we've got some downshore folks here, we've got some guys from Sussex, from northern part of the province, whatever. So depending on what part of the province and what your deer habitat looks like is going to determine what you do for preseason scouting. I live in LaPro, Maces Bay, that area from there downshore. There's not a lot of open ground. So I'm not going to do my preseason scouting driving around. Unfortunately, I don't have that privilege. If I live in Sussex, Wards Creek area, or Frederick, like some areas that have much more open ground where you're going to be hunting on ag fields, cut corn, you have much more visibility. So a lot of your preseason scouting may mean having a coffee regularly in your truck 2 or 3 days a week for that month prior to deer season. And a lot of times it's just getting eyes on the deer and what you have in your area for inventory. And that's not 100% accurate either, because we know those big Roman bucks never stay in one area for the whole season. A lot of times we're hunting deer in October that we're not going to see in November in that area. And a lot of times we're hunting deer, in November that don't show up at our places in October because of the season, the change of the season. So preseason scouting for somebody who's in big woods is very difficult. It's very hard to find patternable big deer in big country without putting some miles on. So one thing that you're going to hear me say throughout the day on this seminar and with Moose is that you need to have boots on the ground. And some people are okay with that and some people aren't. But if you want to shoot big deer consistently, you need to put some miles on. And we all have this. So again, as a precursor to this, I'm going to speak to the rule, not the exception. Okay? And what I mean by that is everybody has a buddy. I have a father that sat in a truck and shot a 150-inch deer last year on the side of the road. I'm not talking to you because it's not realistic. It may happen, but it's not going to be something that you're going to do year in and year out. So what I'm speaking to is something that you can do year in, year out to give you the advantage so that you can harvest a good deer down the road, okay? So postseason scouting, in my opinion, is preeminent when it comes to killing big deer. Post-season scouting, you have much more visibility. You can see where those big deer have been because you have scrapes, you have rubs, you have no leaves on the ground, so you're going to see when I walk into a block of land and I'm looking for a ridge line or something where I can see those big bucks traveling, post-season is much easier to find the areas where those big bucks were 2 weeks ago. So I feel that you have 2 to 3 weeks after our season ends in New Brunswick to really get some good solid feet on the ground after the season. So you always hear the joke or you see it on Facebook, it's like 365, like no days off. There's always a day to hunt. But whatever you can do to put in your arsenal for next year is really important. So if you can find an area where that you knew there was a big buck that you couldn't get this year, well, you know that this time next year, unless something happens, that deer doesn't survive through the winter, chances are that big buck's going to be in that area again. And if he's made it to 4.5 or 5.5 years old, chances are he's going to make it to 6.5 because somebody else is messing up on him, or wherever he is coming from, they're not killing him. So postseason, putting your feet on the ground again, trying to find those scrapes and rubs that were actively used and still are used after, but not as much, are really important to finding, those areas that you want to target for next rut, okay? So, preseason, we want to be using maps. We want to be looking for old rubs, ridge lines, bedding, food, and browsing. So, depending on the time of year, so in October, I'm not so concerned about bedding, okay? But in November, bedding is very important because those bucks are no longer looking at food sources, they're looking at does. So during the rut, bedding is very important because we need to know where those does are bedding, where they're comfortable at, because guess what? The buck is going to be there that you're after, okay? So maps, I'm going to talk about this again with the moose hunting. We have umpteen different types of mapping that you can get a hold of. It is free, it's accessible, so use it. So you can use preseason scouting with your maps, your topo maps. You can find all that stuff before you actually have to put feet in the ground. So where's the mature ground at? Where are those hardwood ridges that you're going to get some more visibility later on in the season? Where's a water source? All those things are available now through mapping. It's very easy to use. So I use iHunter because it has a portion of it that gives me private land so I can tell where I need to be, where I can't be. Permission. So now this is something that we have to think about now as hunters in New Brunswick because there's limitations now what you can do on private land. So anything I believe is 20 acres or bigger, private land, you need to have written permission with you. So that's part of your pre-season workup to the season, is you should have that piece of paper in your truck so you can have it on your person when you're in the woods. It's very important. If you don't have that, a privilege like hunting can be taken away from you now that was never a risk before. And I mean, I understand the point, and it's protect a lot of landowners where people, there's always that guy, right, that leaves a pile of garbage that doesn't, would never go. It's a good habit as an ethical hunter to get permission before you go hunt. It's a lot easier to knock on a door or to find, even the public information now you can find in Service New Brunswick, somebody who has access to Planet System can give you a mailing address or whatever. If you're serious about killing big deer, you need to get permission that you can hunt and feel it's a lot easier sitting in the stand. It's much more comfortable sitting in a stand where you know you have permission. You don't have to worry about dragging a deer out or whatever. It's just not good habit. It's not good for us as a group of hunters because you always have that one guy that we get painted by that leaves a pile of garbage, that doesn't ask permission, walks across, shoots somebody, a deer, And of course, it always runs and falls in front of the deck when they're having a party, and then you have to drag it across their lawn, and then, those things happen. Those are real things that happen, especially if you're in an urban setting here in St. John. There's a lot of good deer that are shot in our urban settings, and if you don't have permission, it's not a good situation, okay? Okay, so early season. Personally, I've had a lot of really good success because I hunt early. It's not always convenient for everybody, but because in the province we have that 3-week bow season, it's something that we all should consider. Is it something that you can do? If you can't pull a bow, can you use a crossbow? And if you can, it gives you a huge early season advantage. So a couple of the big things that why it's an advantage is there's less pressure. There's less people in the woods that you're competing with. So if you can bow hunt, you're not going to have to worry about the noise, the pressure of the rifles. I mean, we do have some early shotgun for duck and whatever, but you don't have that pressure in the woods that you normally have. So another thing that is really important when it comes to early season is those big bucks. If you can locate them and you know where their summer pattern is, you can pattern a 5-year-old. That's a hard thing to believe, but you can. I've done it. It's one of those things that takes, again, a lot of time and effort because you need to find those deer, and they're very difficult to find. But for those first couple weeks in October, those big bucks are very much on a pattern. So they're feeding, a lot of times their schedule, it's like clockwork. Until they get to that where their testosterone starts to move a little bit in the middle of October and they start to get into that seeking phase. If you can find those big bucks those first couple weeks of October, you can get on a big deer and put an arrow in one. One of the biggest deer that I've ever shot, the one we call him Beamer, he's got a 17-inch third main beam. I shot him the first day of the season in 22. So it can happen. You can shoot big deer early season. But again, it involves that preseason work because you can't show up October 1st or October 3rd without any knowledge whatsoever of your area and expect to shoot a deer like that. So bow hunting, certainly an advantage, and no rifles in the woods is also an advantage. Okay. So let's talk about October. October tends to be a month that's overlooked because we talk about rut being those first couple weeks of November, and I still honestly feel like our rut is probably from November 7th. If I had to pick a week for myself, if I was on vacation, if I had a normal job, which I just never have had a normal job, but if I was going to take a week of vacation, to me it's like November 7th to November 12th. If I could be in the woods for those 6 or 7 days, that's the days that I would be in the woods for sure. Routinely, every year, I will get big deer on their feet November 8th, November 9th, November 10th in that area that never daylighted before, okay? So, October. The bigger deer don't certainly move as much during the day in October as they do in November. We know that. However, big deer still move during the day in October. So, as you start to get later into the month of October, from mid-October to later, you start to get a little change in the weather. It starts to get a little bit cooler. Those are the things that you need to take advantage of. So, if there's a weather change, a little cold front come through, those big deer, even though they're just starting to get those levels start to get up in their body and they're starting maybe into the seeking phase, they're still not moving a whole lot. But those are the key times that you need to be hunting in October. Like I say, I've killed a lot of big deer in October. So before I go any further, I wanted to just talk about the bow hunting aspect in October. I've shot 3 or 4 really, really big deer, big body deer, over, I say 200 pound plus is what I say is a different category of deer. So most of the time you're looking at a 4.5-year-old to a 6.5-year-old. If you get over that, if you get over that 200-pound dress weight. So as a bow hunter, there's some things that you can do in October that's going to help you. First of all, you need to think about things that you never had to think about with a rifle. So entry, exit, and we're going to get into some of those slides in a little bit. But clothing, I just brought this shirt, and I brought it for moose and deer. This is what I typically would wear in October. And why I bring this is because even if I have hunters coming in, for a moose hunter, for a bear hunter, whatever, I tell them, wear fleece. You should be using fleece when you're bow hunting. And what everybody's idea of fleece for some reason is different than what I think of as fleece, okay? So this is what I use. I'm just going to hand around. It's nothing fancy. I just want everybody to feel that. And there's a reason why I wear that in October. So it's quiet, it's light, so it's a layer. You can pile up other layers, but this is the type of material that I personally prefer in October for bow hunting. Everybody thinks, there's a big difference between being 20 yards away from that big buck and 40 yards even. There's a big difference between being 15 yards and 30 yards from that big buck. So Beamer, the one I was just speaking about, I was at 3 yards. So basically straight up and down. And I'm going to talk about entry and exit in a little while. But this buck came from my right, and I was in this, dressed in my soft clothing for my October bow hunting. And this deer came across a little ridge and came and was browsing at my feet. And I'm 15 feet off the ground. And he has no idea that I'm there. No idea. I watched him browse in an area that I couldn't draw because my bow was on this side. I had to watch this 160-inch deer at 3 yards for 4 to 5 minutes before he decided to turn and give me an opportunity. He had one step to make, cross my path of entry or take a right and kind of give me a shot. And he took one step, and as I drew with this clothing on, he had no idea I was there. But if I had what I have on now, or if I had on just a regular Canadian Tire outfit of what people say is quiet clothing, that deer, I would never have shot that deer. I would never have killed that, harvested that animal. Because at 10, 15, 20 yards, deer are super alert. And a big buck like that doesn't make a mistake. And if I busted that deer, I would never have seen that deer again. So clothing is very important in October. I know it sounds funny, but I wanted to throw that in there just because to me, it's as a bow hunter, it is very important with what I wear. And we'll talk about scent control and whatever too. So October, deer are those big bucks are more receptive to calling as well. So later on in October, and there's different viewpoints about calling, rattling, and a grunt tube. I just brought just a couple horns. I have a bunch of sets in the trees. A lot of times I need to check something here. Okay. I usually will leave a set of rattling horns in the areas that I know so I don't have to drag them in. So I've got a few sets of these, and each one of my kids has one or whatever, so I usually have them in the stands or whatever. So big bucks are more receptive in October to rattling and grunting, a grunt tube. And it's because now that if they've moved into that seeking phase, now they're jockeying for position. So when I said about the early season advantage to say like October 15th, you're still going to see some bachelor groups of deer. And usually, there's 3 or 4 or 5. Sometimes, you don't, if you're not in an area where there's a lot of deer, you'll see 2 or 3 together. But they're breaking up. By mid-October, they're not buddies anymore. Okay? And those big bucks are starting to jockey for position a little bit to get into that seeking phase pre-rut. And if you are proficient with rattling horns or with a grunt tube, there's a time and space for that. And I don't know if it's because I hunt in big timber with not a lot of visibility. I am nervous about, I have been successful using a grunt tube. I still am very weary about when I use one, and I'll tell you why. If I'm sitting 30 yards from a big buck that I can't see in big timber, I've just told him where I am. Okay? 2 minutes ago, he had no idea it was there. So the moment you open your mouth, or the moment you grab your horns, or your grunt tube, you're like, hey, I'm good enough that I'm going to fool you. And if you mess up, you mess up. Okay? So I watch a lot of deer hunting videos. Midwest Whitetails is one of the groups that I watch, mostly because they're clean. Most of the time, they're pretty clean guys, good watching for kids and whatever. But one of the guys that started that said something to me one time, or said something on the show one time that stuck to me. And he said, I'll never call to a deer. And this is a guy that shot, 2 or 3 bucks over 200 inches now. So you're not talking about somebody that has no idea what they're talking about. He said, I'll never call to a deer that I can't see. And that has stuck with me. And I'll tell you why. It's because if I have no idea what's 50 yards away, why am I calling? I have no idea whether there's a buck there with a doe, without a doe. I don't know whether he's ready or not, if he's going to respond. So unless I have a specific reason or I can watch. So the one time that I did, like I say, I've grunted, I've shot big deer. I called in a beautiful 8-point one time. I watched 2 or 3 bucks together. It was a doe. It was early season. I used a grunt tube. He came to me on a string, and I shot him at like 16 yards. I pulled him up, but I watched him. So I can see how he's reacting to that grunt tube. Whereas if I have a deer, 100 yards on the other side of a ridge, I have no idea what he's doing. So I'm not saying don't call, because it works. But I tend to lean towards this thought that if I can't see what's going on, I won't call. So I don't want to call unless I know exactly how the deer is reacting to what I'm calling, okay? Hope that makes sense to you. So October is a great month to kill big deer, okay? Okay, so a few more things I just wanted to talk about. So November, am I missing a slide? I think I'm missing a slide. No? Maybe I didn't get it in there. Okay, we're just going to go with that for now. Okay, so November, before I get into this, I'm just going to briefly talk about November, okay? So November is a different hunt altogether, okay? So I touched on this a little bit a while ago, is that sometimes you're hunting deer in November that you've never seen before. So I have stands that I faithfully will feed does, but I know there's no sense sitting that until the first week of November, because I will never see a mature buck there, ever, until the 10th of November. But I also hunt areas in October that I routinely have those big mature deer in October that November they've moved out of there because there's no does, okay? So November hunting, the biggest aspect of the November hunt is you need to hunt what the big bucks are hunting, okay? So you need then to think about where your does are, where are the bedding areas that are holding the does, because that is what your shift and your focus is now on, is that if you feed them, this is where I wrote that on there somewhere, I don't know where, I said, if you feed them, he will come, okay? On a play on the old ball field, right? So if you have those does, you need to hang on to those does at that time of year. That's going to be your key to success in November. It's not going to be pattern those bucks anymore now, because pattern has totally gone out the window. Because you may see a big buck Tuesday morning at 3 a.m., and you may see him Tuesday night at 9 p.m., and then you might see him at 1 a.m. 3 days from now, and you might not see him a week later, because his range has gone so much, expanded so much now, that there's probably 14 other guys that have had him on camera, and you're all hunting the same deer at one point, okay? So what can we do as a hunter to make a big buck feel comfortable in November in your area so that you have an opportunity to put a bullet in them or put an arrow in them, okay? So, big bucks are smart. Don't help them, okay? They have every ability in the world to smell you, see you, and to pattern you. So don't be that guy that always has a big deer on camera that can never shoot it, okay? Some of these things will help you do that. Do not overhunt an area, okay? So I'm going to expand on that a little bit. And this is where I was talking about things don't come easy, okay? It's not something that happens overnight. So I have several stands, and I position my stands so that I can hunt somewhere every day if I wanted to with a different wind. That may sound crazy, okay? But if you want to kill a big deer, you cannot hunt that deer when the wind is wrong. You will ruin your area. You will get likely one opportunity, maybe two, but most likely one opportunity at that big buck a year, if you're lucky that he comes during daylight. And if you mess it up, or if he has any idea that you're there, the chances go way down, okay? So do not overhunt an area. So I know that's tough because time is a limitation to a lot of people, so you only have, a couple hours to run apples out or run whatever. But at least if you can have maybe 2 or 3 places that you can set up, that will help you a lot. So set up one stand so that you've got south-facing wind in your face all the time. And then set up a stand somewhere else in a different area that you've got a north wind in your face all the time. So at least if you can't set up 4 or 5 different spots, even if you have 2, so you don't put the pressure on one spot all the time, okay? So I'm going to show you another thing that's changed my life, okay? So I'm sponsored by these guys, by the way. So I understand how much these cost because I've paid for them for years. So I've got about 10 of these now that they've given me, Spy Point. Cell cams are worth their weight in gold, okay? For a couple reasons. $15 a month, I don't have to lug 2 extra bags of apples in and then find out there's a bag of apples still there. I can make 1 trip in a week as opposed to 2 or 3 and not knowing if that big deer was there or not, okay? So, yes, you're going to pay more for these, and I'm not by any chance like promoting I'm not making any money, just so you know. I don't care what brand or whatever, but what I'm saying is like investing in a camera or 2, it could make the difference between you shooting that big buck or not. And if you want to sit on the side of a field and say, well, I'm a traditionalist, I'm a purist, I'm going to wait till that big buck, I'm going to use a long bow, and I'm going to sit here on the edge of this cornfield until that big 10-point walks in front of me, and 14 years later you're still sitting there, that's cool, that's you. I'm not. Time is money for me, so whatever advantage that I can get in the field, I'm going to take. So if I can use cell cams to save me time, money, effort, and it's time, mostly it's time. If you're running several stands, these things are gold because the $15 that you spend a month on a plan for unlimited photos saves you the gas and time to go in there. And I don't hunt close to roads. So a lot of times I've got a great big bag of apples and I'm like trucking up a hill and it could take me 45 minutes to get in and out of my stands. So if you can be in service, this is something I can encourage you to think about doing, investing in a good trail cam. Okay, so don't overhunt an area. That's why I stopped at that point.
That is for sure though. Like, they don't play much good effect if you got no service for your hunting. They gotta send it to your.
Exactly. So these cameras. So this one here, I haven't even tried these. I got 2 new ones. I have a Flex S Dark and a Flex Dark. This one is infrared. So the Flex S has it's an extra like solar panel on it. I run the regular ones. I haven't run these dark ones yet. These ones have no glow, nothing on these ones, these Flex Dark ones or whatever. They're about $300, these ones here, something like that for that camera. But they need service. they need service to work. Like they still take fantastic photos, and you can go get the SD card out, the micro SD or whatever, and I run them. Yeah, I even started running them for bear cameras this year, whatever. I normally wouldn't, but because I got enough of them now, I would, just because I don't want them eating them. But having one of these, like you say, in service. So there are places I use them that there's no service, but you just have to go get the card. So I like these ones for bear hunting because the moment you put your finger on that camera, that bear knows where that camera's at. So if I don't have to touch the camera and it just sends me photos, there's less likely, like I have one partly chewed this year, and I usually go through 2 or 3 cameras faithfully every deer season or every bear season, because bears eat my cameras, okay? So the moment that I touch and the bear runs out of food at my barrel and I've touched that camera somewhere, he's going to find it. He knows where it's at, especially if the sow's there with cubs. She's going to be bored because there's no food and the cubs are running up the tree and they're like, what's that? That looks like $300. I think I'm going to eat it. So cell cams are definitely worth their weight in gold, okay? So wind is king. Wind is king. Wind is king, okay? Do not hunt when the wind is wrong. It'll ruin your hunt for the year. You need to put into practice self-restraint to say, I am willing to stay away from this stand if the wind is wrong. And if you don't do that, the chances of you shooting that big mature buck goes way down, okay? I know it's hard. Last year, before I did shoot a big, beautiful 10 last year, thankfully, but I had a huge 9 last year that I really had my heart set on, and I set a stand up specifically for him. Bow season, it was an area I couldn't rifle hunt, so I had him set up. And for 2 weeks, while that deer was running around my camera around does, the wind was exactly wrong. And I set up, I know my areas pretty well, and last year I set up for a southwest wind. Man, it was northeast and north like day in, day out, day out. I was like, check the weather, check the weather, check the weather. And I never hunted that deer, but I'm going to hunt him this year. And I'm going to have 2 stands set up. You know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I know I don't want to take the chance. I tell you, the other issue is that if you blow a deer out of that area, right now he's okay. He's not dead, and you're still hunting him, and you still have an opportunity to kill him. If you blow him out of your area, now you've opened up an opportunity for a whole bunch of other people to kill him, because now you've pushed him into somewhere where he's not normally in, or he's out of your area because he's not comfortable in your area. So now, all of a sudden, that deer that you had to yourself, you may not have to yourself anymore. Okay? Does that make sense? I mean, it seems simple, but it's real true. Okay? Hunt for the first daylight encounter. So if you've had deer on your camera and you know that there's a doe that's coming into heat, he seems to be acting more and more aggressive towards the does, where you see them starting to get them on camera together, you need to hunt when the wind is right for that first time that he comes daylight. Because a lot of times you're only going to get 1, 2, maybe 2 or 3 times a year if you get a big buck to come daylight. There's always the exception, right? But usually a big deer is only going to travel during that time when he's with a doe. And he's not there for apples then. He's in there for her. So you need to hunt for that first opportunity, daylight. How much better would it be the first time he's daylight to be on the back of your truck than on your camera and say, there he is. You know, it happens to all of us, right? So hunt like he's going to come daytime. When you see that change and you know that he's traveling with does and whatever, you need to hunt for that first opportunity, okay? Bait heavier and stay away until the wind is right. I can't express this enough, okay? I may be to the extreme because I'm lugging in, bags and bags and bags of apples. But what does it do when you bait heavy? You're at the stand less. Your feet are going across his path less, okay? And you're just not putting any pressure on there whatsoever. So as much as we want to talk about scent control, entry and exit, Super, super important, okay? When you're talking about those big deer, you never, ever, 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 ever want to set up a stand where you have to cross his path, okay? If you know that there's a hard trail at the back of a cut or going through across that ridge or through that apple orchard, you never, ever, ever want to have to take your bag of apples and go across his trail to set up your stand. Because every time you go across that trail, you've left 10 hours of scent. Your footprint will leave 10 hours of scent every time you go across it. So, for all my big deer hunting, I never will travel in on his trail. I will never travel across his trail. I always find a way to get in, to set up so that he's going to run parallel to me or across in front of me or where the apples are, wherever you're going to be hunting. If you're hunting ag, it's the same thing. You need to find a pinch point, a pressure point where you know those deer are traveling, that you don't have to cross him, okay? Because the bucks, now during rut, a doe is more sensitive to your smell than he is, but that early season and coming into October, if you mess up and go across his trail, it's like you know, a little hint of perfume or a little hint of cologne or something like that. Yeah, there's somebody here, something not right, okay? So whatever you can do, and I find that baiting heavier and waiting till the wind is right. And I'm telling you, that's a hard thing to do when you got one target buck on your head or two bucks, and you're like, man, like all my buddies are in the woods and I'm sitting home and I know he could be there. But you know he could be there, but if you're there, the chances of him coming back after he busts you is pretty slim. It's not going to happen, okay? So wind, 100% is king. So baiting heavier and staying away until the wind is right. Okay, that's very difficult to do. And I think discipline in yourself to staying away from the stand, making it say, like, you know what? I'm okay with eating tag soup if I have to. You have to have that mentality. If you want to shoot a big deer, you have to have that mentality. If if November 25th comes and I don't have a deer in the freezer, I'm going to be okay with that. And, there may be an option where you can hunt hard for 3 to 4 weeks and say, well, I can go shoot something on. But if you truly want to harvest a big deer year after year after year, like I say, I'm not speaking to the exception because everybody knows that guy, that seems like he shoots a big deer every year. He's got a piece of private land he sits on and, there's no pressure and whatever. But that was never me. I bought my first piece of land that I could hunt on this year, and I'm 44. So I've always had to work hard, spend time in the woods, learn. So if you want to consistently shoot big deer, you have to be willing to eat tag soup. And that's hard to do sometimes as a guy that, tends to want to shoot big deer. It's hard. It's a hard thing to do, okay? So this is still a game. It's still fun. The Lord blessed us with the ability to go and enjoy His woods, His creation. So every season, you need to learn and enjoy it. Because there's a lot of people that can't do what we can do and what we're able to do, okay? So if you can take one bit of information from this season and move forward to the next, and that's what a little bit earlier on when I was talking about how it's preseason, postseason, 0 days off type of thing, it is a process. It's a process from thinking about shooting, a 4-point or a 6-point or an 8 and holding out, and it's not about the antler size, it's about the maturity of the animal. So we want to be pushing everybody. I'm totally okay with somebody, like, I've shot spikes before. I promise I did. I've shot a spike before. 2, I think. But overall, we want people to be shooting more mature animals to help the population, right? We're getting blessed now with a pretty good population of deer in the southern part of the province. So trying to push everybody, even if you have a young fellow, my boys, hunt or whatever, it's like each year I kind of set a goal and say, hey, listen, maybe you should pass on that 6-point and let your brother hunt it, or if you don't, maybe you should wait and see if you can shoot an 8-point or shoot something that's at least 3.5 years old, as opposed to taking a 1.5 or 2.5-year-old deer, okay? So it's always just like kind of pushing your limit each year. Set a goal to, to achieve. It's not easy. It's not easy to consistently shoot big deer year after year after year. And unless you set that pattern in place early on when you start this process or whatever, it's hard to do. But just kind of set a goal for yourself. Push yourself. Push yourself to your limit a little bit. It doesn't hurt to go that extra 200 yards to get to that ridge line that that buck travels on. If you can physically do it, why not do it? Push a little bit harder, hunt a little bit harder, hunt a little bit longer, put a little bit more time in the stand. The more deer you see, the more deer you observe, the more apt you are to know what to do in that situation. So when it comes to calling and grunting, and you're never going to get that experience unless you spend time in the stand. So passing on some of those smaller deer, watching the does, those are all learning experiences. So any of you guys in here that have kids that's priceless time that you can spend with your kids and family. We've enjoyed 4 kids coming up, learning how to hunt. And those times I've spent in the stand where you're videotaping and just hanging out with the does and seeing the odd little buck go through or whatever, like those things are just awesome experiences. But you learn because you observe what the deer, how they're acting, and what you can get away with, even movement in the stand and all those experiences. But you can't do that if you shoot the first deer that comes in, right? And we got to get away from that mentality. I'm not saying like your 12-year-old's the first time she's got a bow in her hand. Fantastic, enjoy the experience. But that doesn't mean you can't have a healthy realization for like another year and say, hey, we did that together, that's awesome. Let's hold out for a 2-year-old this time. Or let's, maybe we don't shoot something the first night. Let's sit and watch the does and see how it reacts when a little buck comes in. Or maybe there's 2 little bucks that are saying, like, let's watch them see if they spar and see if I can get one to call or we'll see if I can get one to answer. All those little things are going to educate you as you get older, as you learn more, as your deer hunting career gets older. You get to learn, okay, I remember that little buck didn't react very good to the grunt tube, or the first deer that came in on when I rattle was that little guy. So you're never going to have that opportunity to learn if you shoot the first deer. So those little things, it's a process. So preseason, postseason scouting. So learn from the season, enjoy what God has given you, and learn. And the next year, hopefully you can take it to the next level. All right. So before I close, I don't know if there's anything, broad strokes, if anybody has any questions that some of the topics I've touched on or whatever, that anybody got any questions? Surely I didn't answer all your questions. No one? Yep. So I primarily bear hunt in the spring. A bear that eats my apples is fair game in the fall. So yeah, a lot of times you're going to end up. A spring bear is not going to be. I'm not going to be hunting my deer anywhere as close to where I do my spring bear hunt for sure. But fall bear, a lot of times you're going to see. So the minute you put beef finisher out or some apples in October, if there's a bear in the area, he's going to find you. So it's nice to have the second tag because you can keep that tag in your pocket, and if you get a provision for a bear, you can take it. We've done that too, right? So normally deer. So just briefly talk about like when I'm looking for big deer. Everybody has this thought in their mind because they've watched a YouTube video or a hunting show at some point where this great big hardwood ridge and this great big rack is going down through the woods and somebody puts an arrow in and they shoot. That's not reality, okay? A big deer does not live in a hardwood ridge, okay? Nor does a big moose. Those animals like mixed growth, okay? Because it's conducive to cover, food, and their does, okay? So a bear, tends to be not really a whole lot around hardwood ridges and whatever. So a fall hunt, I guess what I'm looking at for where I'm looking deer hunt is not necessarily but the bear hunt is totally, to me, it's a totally different aspect when I'm looking for a spot set up for deer. But the deer need to have, when you're looking at the mixed growth, So if you have some pecker brush or some type of, deer need browsing, okay? So you're not going to find big deer in big open areas where there's no food. They're going to be, like these plantations or whatever, like they're going to go through there. You get a big buck and he's going to go across the highway, you're going to see them go through there. But those big ridges that we're talking about, you're only going to see those deer going through there because there's a doe that's ahead of him and he's running across that. That's not his normal pattern. That's not where he's living. He's living somewhere where there's big growth, mixed forest, so he has, good browsing, good cover, somewhere where he may be able to go into that hardwood ridge, but he's like 4 hops away from some good cover, pecker brush, where you can't tell whether it's alders or whether it's his rack. That's where those big deer, a big buck, man, can live in like an acre land and could spend the afternoon there. You'd never pick them out. So they don't need a lot of ground, but it needs to be the right ground to find them, okay?
Back to how you were talking about setting up based on your wind. So you have a handful of spots set up so that you can basically hunt any wind. Obviously, there'd be a fair amount of people that wouldn't have the time or money to have that spot set up. So if you really only had the time and money to focus on one spot, would you consider having that one spot with potentially 2 different stands? So generally, would you say?
So if you have one spot, the option, you always have an option of setting up 2 stands. The problem with that is depending on where that deer comes from, okay? So you can set up, like say if you're facing south, okay, and you know that deer runs from west to east, that's a ridge line, okay? Well, you could set up, in a southwest corner and a northwest corner of that and just cut a couple shooting lanes, so that chances are that deer, but depending on whether there's more southern, coming that morning or you could pick which, and there is a possibility of doing that. The risk is when you set up 2 locations like that, is that big buck doesn't use every time you put a stand or every time you go set up or whatever, it's just that one more chance that deer is going to go across where you got to, right? Like that big deer that I'm talking about that came to 3 yards, I shot him. I walked in from the south, got up in my tree, and he came directly from my east side and came literally to my feet. And if he went around my tree like that, I would have been done, because if he would have crossed my path that way, which was only an hour before, like there's no way I'm getting around to make that shot. It's just impossible. Even if I stood up, I had a branch like this, there was just no way. My only chance was him to turn that way. I would have been busted. There's no way. But that's my only entrance and my only exit there, because I know it's away from his core area. So a lot of times too, like, why don't you kill that big buck when everybody else has it on the camera? Most of the time it means that you're either messing up with your wind or with your cover or with your, with your feet when you're walking across, or you're not hunting his core area. So just give you an example. I had 4 or 5 years ago, I was hunting one area. I had a 145-inch 8-point, which is, for anybody that knows that, it's a huge 8-point. I had him on camera faithfully during rut one fall, and not one daytime photo of him, okay? I had a buddy that lives 2.5 kilometers away from me. He had him on camera twice during the day that season, or the following season, sorry. So I know, and I couldn't move closer to him. I didn't want to infect anything. But I know that deer is basically unkillable for me unless he makes a mistake with the doe. Because I am not in his home core. I'm not there. Deer are alive middle of the day in October. And most people think, well, like, they're just not, they're nocturnal. It's like, no, they're not. They spend less time, for sure. Those big bucks spend less time on their feet in the daytime. But they're alive somewhere. It's like a big bull. A big bull is alive 2 o'clock in the afternoon, too, not 6:30 in the morning into 8:30. Like, so obviously I was not hunting his core area where he felt comfortable. So that guy ended up shooting that deer the next season. I had him on camera. No daytime photos at all of him at all. So it wasn't overpressure because I didn't even hunt it. I just had apples out for the does and whatever. He was 2 kilometers away, and he actually shot at him with a shotgun. and then killed him. That was on a Sunday, and he killed him. He came out again on Thursday chasing the doe. And I couldn't even get a look at him, and I'm not even there, and I couldn't get a look at him. So there's some deer that are unkillable, but it's not because you're making a mistake. It's because you're not close to where he's comfortable during the daytime. Chances are that he knows you're there. He's patterned you. So bait heavy, stay away less. Or you can move your stand if you have the ability. You can move your stand 200-300 yards, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be 5 miles down the road. It's like sometimes it's like 300 yards you can get different deer on because it's a different ridge line or whatever. So that's another challenge is that, if you have this sporadic deer coming through once in a while, sometimes what I'll do is just haul ship, and I'll just move 300 yards, 400 yards, somewhere different because I'm obviously not in their core area. And sometimes that makes all the difference, man. Like I've had where you put the camera, it's like, man, daytime. It's just because I'm there where he is during the day. He's not where I am, where I was set up. He's just not comfortable there. So it may seem like the perfect spot to me, but it's obviously not the perfect spot for him because he's not comfortable there, or he would be daytime. Okay? Sorry, hon. So October, late October, early November. So tell you one thing I do. I cut the brows off. Okay, so it saves your hands because when you're smashing them together. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this a little bit when it comes to the moose hunting seminar too. Sometimes less is more. Okay, and it goes with calling too. So whatever you commit to doing, you need to commit to doing well. So if you're going to be aggressive with these, you need to fool that 5-year-old to really think that you're a big guy taking his does. So if do you really think a 5-year-old's going to come in there and fight you because you've just convinced him that you're maybe a 2-year-old? And so why I say that is because whatever you decide to do, if that's your tactic, is just out of curiosity to see what's in the area, tinkling of the antlers sometimes works. They come right in. But if you're really targeting one buck that you know is in the area, then you need to be aggressive enough to know, he needs to know that, okay, there's somebody that's really a dominant buck in my area that's challenging me for my does, okay? So I would say that, short bursts that are good and strong between like 8:30 and 10:30 in the morning are something that seems like it works. I find, in a tree stand it's hard too, but it's nice to get on the ground when you're doing it because you can actually make the leaves and everything because you're trying to convince a deer that there's an actual fight happening or whatever, right? But so you got to picture 2 big deer, maybe 180 to 200 pounds, locked on. This is not it. This is 2 1.5-year-olds fighting over my apples. Okay? So that's why I say I cut the brows off because these are small. I have like probably 4.5-year-olds, like I have like bigger set, and I'm clamping them because that's what I'm trying to convince that deer that there's really somebody aggressive and worthwhile coming in to fight. Okay? So short bursts where they lock instead of. So it's 2 good big deer that are actually locked on together. And sometimes there's not a lot of movement. And that's why I say if you're on the ground doing this, you can actually scuff the ground and make that noise like you're actually fighting because that's the way they fight. There's very little of this. It's most of the time they're locked on. It's a pushing war, right? So you do hear this, but it's the pressure that comes with the 2 deer that are coming together. So a good set of horns, like say, I usually keep a set in every stand or whatever, kind of tickle like early season. But again, I would discourage, I don't want to totally discourage you from using these. It's just, I feel like it's for the more experienced hunter, just because I think you need to watch the deer and how they react before you can do this to do it effectively. That's all. And like I say, you could go out tomorrow and they're like next, and say, yeah, well, I proved that Shane's wrong. And it's true. Like, I mean, people have great luck with these or whatever. But my my tendency is to, less is more, even when it comes to calling. So, okay. What do we got for time? We're 10 after. Okay. One more question? Anybody have any one more question?
Do you use cover scent?
So I'm not a cover scent guy. I'm a no scent wash guy. Okay. I think it's baloney, to be honest with you. And I've been around, like, I co-host the moose hunting. I spend time in studio with guys that make their living selling no scent spray and all this. I think it's water. I'm totally convinced that it's just useless stuff, to be honest with you. And my go-to is I buy scent-free soap for the laundry, and I'm careful with what I do with my clothes. To me, if the wind is wrong, the wind is wrong. You guys know who Tim Wells is? Relentless Pursuit. Crazy archer. I hunted with an outfitter in Calgary, or just below Calgary one time, and Tim came to hunt in mule deer with him. And he said to me, Tim has killed like everything and anything under the sun. And he said that to Frank, the outfitter that I went with, and he said, you know what? If the wind is wrong, it doesn't matter what you have on. You can help. I've used ozonics. I've used scent control. I've used it all. And I'll be honest with you, we shot a good deer. Ashley and I shot a good deer one year, and I swear it was the ozonics. The wind was totally wrong. And I was watching the buck come down the hill. She was facing the other way in the stand, and I used an ozonics unit. I used it. I will not rely on that to kill my scent every time I go in the woods. No wash scent. Put your clothes in a hard shell plastic container or a garbage bag, and do not use them. Wear hunting boots that you use hunting. Don't wear them to the gas station. Don't wear them to the superstore. Have clothes that you wear in the stand, especially for bow hunters, okay? Rifle season, you're sitting at 100 yards away, it's a different story. But when you're trying to get a big buck in at 20, 25 yards, you need, and this is, remember I said, they're smart enough. You don't need to help them, okay? So this spray, maybe, I don't know. I don't know whether it works or not, but I know for sure no scent does work. Like, we're faithful to do that. Every 2 or 3 days that I hunt in a set of clothes, it goes in the wash, and I'm very careful with that because my wife will laugh at me because she always has like the lipstick, and not the lipstick, like I don't know, what do you call it? Chapstick or whatever. She always gets something scented like cinnamon. I'm like, I smell that. She's like, yeah, I killed the big one. I killed that one. That was mine. Like, what do I say, right? It's like, anyway, so, if the wind is wrong, they're going to smell whether it's the chapstick or whether it's your stinky feet. Like, the wind is wrong, the wind's wrong. You can't fool them on the wind. So, wind is king.
So when you wash with the no scent, how do you dry it?
Dry it in dryer. No scent, I just make sure your dryer's cleaned out good, and you can buy the static control things with that's no scent too. Yeah, and you can buy them, like, I actually have some, I bought them before. They smell like spruce needles, like spruce trees or whatever. So, just one quick thing too. We're talking about the setup in October, like we're talking about the scent control, and this is like in tight stuff. If you have an opportunity to put a tree stand in a spruce tree or in a fir tree, particularly it'd be better in a spruce tree just because fir trees are very sticky. If you can get in that, there's nothing more unnatural than looking up and a deer skylining you in a big maple that you should not be there, okay? So the big straight tree that's in the middle of your clearing is not the place to put your stand, okay? So if you can look around, be aware of where you're setting up, get yourself into something good and solid, 8-10 inches round minimum, and somewhere where there's some cover, some natural branches, whatever, that's going to go a long way. When you're talking about hunting bear, eyesight stinks, okay? When you're hunting deer, they're on high alert all the time, okay? And they've got fantastic scent, fantastic eyes. You really have to hunt smart, okay? So if you can get yourself in a tree where there's some cover, you want to be in it, and that will help you on your October hunt.
Are you for or against kind of artificially covering up the tree? Like you don't have much access to trees with good coverage early in the season so that they have time to
Yep,
get
set up early.
clear of it?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So I've done that before too, somewhere where there's not a lot of cover. If you're going to do anything, do it early. Do it early. And if you're going to have to do it, like sometimes, like, not saying that you can't hang and hunt and kill a deer, because you can. But most of the time on a hang and hunt, you get one opportunity because he doesn't know you're there. But the moment he comes in and sees something new, then all of a sudden that's out the window. So if you can set up early, if you're using ground blood, take the time to get yourself set up somewhere that is, yep. Well, if you're bow hunting, you want to be, a couple weeks before the season. Like if you can be putting some apples out or whatever, grain this time of year or whatever, like 2 weeks before opener, pretty well, I would say. Other than that, you're going to be baiting bears and you're wasting your time but the early season scouting, and that's why I say, like, if from year in, year out, where those deer are for the next year, whether you're wasting your time. Because there's some spots now that I hunt in November that I just don't put apples out until mid-October, because I've tried 2 or 3 years, early season, and I just cannot get big deer there. It's just does only, and you're just feeding and wasting time and effort and money. And I just stay away from them until mid-October and hope that I get one early in October. But I just don't bait them. Okay? They do, 100%. No, they absolutely do. Much better to be in a ground blind, a pop-up tent than you are just sitting on the ground, for sure, because it conceals movement and your scent. So with a black background, so you got to take that into account. Early season now, if you're in the tree or in the ground blind, you can take your orange off during bow season, right? Only bow season though. So that's when you want to think of wearing blackout, right? Black hat, so. If you're sitting in the ground blind, you want to be as back as far as you can in the blind, comfortable to draw or to use your crossbow, because you want to just see that. And that's why I say setting up early. Those deer are used to that black hole being there, so they don't want to go in there and see an orange hat. Like a deer will pick that up. A bear may not. They're just more conducive to the scent. But a big whitetail, man, like he'll just look through your soul. Like he's just like, hey. It's just the way that they're smart. They just don't. Okay? So ground blinds are great. They are very good. And this is something, like, as a dad with kids that love to hunt, that I've done like year after year after year. I always have at least a couple ground blinds somewhere that if you get bad weather, you can get in there and you can still rifle hunt or whatever, because you don't have to worry about the rain, right? Because that's in November, man, like I've killed more big deer in the rain, in those miserable days that you don't want to get out of bed. Those are the days and that's a little bit about what I said about pushing yourself. Hunt a little bit more, hunt a few more days, hunt a little bit worse weather. All of those things will help you, achieve that goal of getting a big animal. And bad weather is fantastic deer hunting weather. I would say as a rule, when it's windy, it's not the weather. When it's windy, animal movement is less, because they're more aware of what's going on, because they can't make out what the difference is, the noise. So they may move less, but they still move. So bad weather itself, like rain, sleet, hail, man, like deer move like crazy, especially during the rut when the weather's like that. You want to be sitting on a pocket of like pecker brush or alder swale in mid-November with a rainstorm coming or a little bit of snow. You want to see some movement. That's when you want to be out there. So that's why I say, like, if you can be in a ground blind or somewhere where you're comfortable in setting yourself up to be, because no one, the first day that you sit in a stand and get wet and soaked and cold, and your wife's with you or your kid's with you and they're freezing and complaining, guess what? It's not really fun for them to think about going tomorrow or next week when the opportunity is right and the wind is right? So put yourself in a position, Get yourself set up enough that you can say, we can go do this comfortably, so that next time, you may get an opportunity, or you may get an opportunity at that time, right? So there's lots of little tricks that you can do to, make your season much more comfortable, but a lot of it is, getting that work done preseason, getting it ready so that when the time comes, you don't have to think on your feet.